After the First World War, Britain began to rethink the colonization thing, and they began a process of decolonization. Most countries, especially in Africa, began to gain their independence in the 60s. The transition sometimes was smooth, sometimes was rough. But when it came to my country, as it was known back then, Rhodesia, when it was time to give rule back to the majority, the Rhodesians did not want that. They said that if you give power to these people, they will destroy the country, which ironically they ended up doing. So the Rhodesians declared what was called the UDI, and unilateral, unilateral, whatever that means, Declaration of Independence. And they were put under sanctions by the international community. Despite being put under sanctions, they thrived quite well. They were quite ingenious. And the African became restless, wanting self-rule just like our brothers in other African countries. So what happened is, the state under the UDI, in the later stages led by Ian Smith, it had a strong resource constraint, but South Africa and other countries were covertly supplying us with, all of them, with weapons and whatever they needed. They could purchase helicopters from France under whatever shady guises that they did. They thrived despite the sanctions. And I think one of the biggest reasons for the success of Rhodesia is the system of the white man of accountability. Yes, corruption is endemic in any society, but in white-run societies, their institutions give way so that if someone is caught being corrupt, they'll surely face the wrath of the law, or at least measures will be taken so that it won't affect the whole economy. Under the UDI, Rhodesia was under sanctions, but things were functioning. The country was being run. Inflation was at a steady pace, just like any other country. Then the guerrillas, the people who are currently in power, we are now Zimbabwe from Rhodesia, they fought for our independence, or so they said. And despite the Rhodesians having little resources and being under sanctions, they fought a guerrilla war for a long, long time, and the comrades, or the guerrillas, they used to call themselves comrades. Yes, in the end, at Lancaster House, they ended up getting what they wanted, but in terms of the fight, the Rhodesians put up a brave fight. And what happened? Once we gained independence, nationalization started, parastatals were formed, or maybe they were there to begin with, but they just became more visible due to the corruption. We had no sanctions. The sanctions were lifted. We took back our land. The sanctions were reinstated. And that's where we see a clear chasm between the Rhodesian way and the Zimbabwean way. While Rhodesia thrived under sanctions, Zimbabwe is going to shit under sanctions, and it's the song we're only blaming the sanctions, not the rampant corruption that is ongoing in our country. We recently had an anti-sanction march, but I really think we need an anti-corruption march. Corruption is our biggest enemy, not these sanctions. Yes, they are there, they affect us, and I need to do further study on them. I plan to later make a video about sanctions, but I really think the African mindset needs to rid itself off of corruption if we want to set a place to be respected at the world stage. We need to get rid of corruption. This has been Jiggy Speaks, an oversimplified history of Zimbabwe to Rhodesia.